What is going on YouTube? It is Primitive here and welcome back to another archetype breakdown video. Today we are going to be going over Alphamon, which is kind of just an updated X-Antibody deck, which we did go over the last format. Now obviously we got a lot of things from BT9 that add to this deck, so it's pretty much a completely different deck. So we are going to be going over it again. But one thing I do want to say going into it, just like in BT8 though, the X-Antibody / Alphamon decks are relatively solved to a degree where a lot of the decks are going to look fairly similar. So when we do go over to the spreadsheet here, I do believe we're going to see a lot of the cards looking fairly the same as far as ratios. So we're going to go through less decks than we normally would in one of these videos, but as always, the spreadsheet and the list that I have will be linked in the description. So if you want to go over more of the decks, you will be able to access those down below, and feel free to. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start getting on into these deck lists that we're going to be looking at today. And also just to mention, just like I did in the last breakdown video, all these lists that we're going to be looking at are from the JP meta because we don't have any events going on in NA here. We will be having some events coming up soon, so there's a chance that maybe we come back and look at this later, but all the decks that we're going to be looking at are from the JP metagame, so coming into the English metagame, there might be some changes. So getting on into this first list, we have the 4 Doraemon as the Digitama. I think this is pretty much correct. Most decks of the Alphamon are going to be playing this ratio just because you sit and raising so much that you're not really going to be getting to a 5th egg. Some decks from X-Antibody last format and probably bleeding over into this format might play a 1 of Kyokyomon as the 5th egg, but for the most part, the 4 Doraemon is just the best egg, and I see this playing it here so that way you just have the consistent same effect. Then we have an astonishing 9 rookies with just the 4 Doraemon, the 4 Ryudomon, and one of the new BT9 Doraemon. 9 rookies is super insane. I think 10 rookies, which is what is played a lot, is already too low. Yes, you have a lot of ways to search, but it's still a super low rookie count, and you're going to a lot of times miss that rookie turn 1, so you're going to be 1 turn behind building up your stack. So 9 is super low. If you're playing that, you're making room for other cards later in the list, so we'll have to look at that. But they did decide to go down with the 1 Doraemon. The new Doraemon does give you some more draw as well, so you could use this to get some draw if you need that. So yes, this deck does have some consistency, but 9 rookies is still a pretty low for seeing it in your opening hand. Now, getting on into the champions, we have the 4 Darugamon and the 4 Genryumon, 1 Grumblemon. So we have the 1 Grumblemon for hybrid, which is nice. Some decks play 2. A lot of the time you're playing Black Memory Boost, you're going to be able to pop this up and go on top of one of your Tamers and just go for game. Plus you're playing some pretty good Tamers in the X-Antibody deck, so it works well. The Darugamon makes a lot of sense as well. It's just a good inheritable while also being blocker. It's just kind of the key champion to go up into. What's surprising though is the Genryumon at 4. We aren't playing the Dex Darugamon here. We are just playing Genryumon. This is a card that is played in a lot of decks, but is cut down in some decks as well. So not seeing the Dex Darugamon at all is a little bit interesting, but deciding to go up with that Genryu. Now, getting on into the ultimates, we just have the 4 Dorogreymon and the 3 Dex Dorogreymon, just keeping it nice and simple with the 3. You're going to go up into the Dorogreymon and then go up for 1 into the Dex Dorogreymon. That's kind of the stack that you want anyway. You want to get those extra inheritables in there for when you go up to, like, or you can mode later and whatnot. So I do like this. We did see some decks playing Hisaryumon. It is cut here. I don't think it's as good. Dex Dorogreymon is just pretty good, so I do respect it. We are going pretty heavy on the Megas though. We have the same amount of level 6s that we do level 5s with the 3 Oryumon and the 4 Alphamon. So I feel like this is fairly standard, maybe going down to the 3 Alphamon here. I think a lot of the decks are playing the 3 Oryumon, 3 Alpha, 3 Oryukin, just because it's fairly consistent that way, and also having 7 Megas with your 7 Ultimates is pretty overkill for some bricking potentially, especially when your Dex Dorogreymon a lot of times is going to go over your Dorogreymon, so that way it's not really going to count as a 7th ultimate. It's going to just kind of overlap, so it is a high count, but I do like the 3-4-3 anyway. The 3 Oryukin mode I feel like is the fairly standard amount. It can brick sometimes, I'm sure, when you're playing it at 3. We've seen this when you play decks like Security Control with Zord Defeat. Sometimes you are going to break those level 7s in your hand, but if you do get the Oryukin out, you're obviously going to be able to have those big power spike turns, so having the consistency of getting it out of your hand is going to be good, so playing at 3 makes a lot of sense. Now, getting onto the Tamers, start off with 2 Coda and 3 Yuji. I have seen a lot of the Alpha list starting to cut down on the Coda, not needing the Memory Tamer or the Search as much. I still like playing it because it is a Memory Tamer. It's going to help a lot. Obviously, Yuji here and Cool Boy are going to give you a lot of access to memory on top of things like Black Memory Boost, but I still think being able to start at 3 is strong, especially in the early game when you're starting to build up. Plus, you can stack all these on top of the start at 3, so we can get even more dynamic turns, so I like still playing it at 2. And then, of of course, the UG, you're going to be able to gain and draw and put sources underneath. This card is super key. I think you're playing this 3 or 4 of, I would assume, but I think 3 is fairly good. At 4, you're going to see it pretty consistently, but this is one of those decks where you probably want Cool Boy more, so I like the 4 Cool Boy and then making room by cutting down on the UG, just because this is going to allow you to search for basically everything and be able to gain the memory off the Dexter Greymon. I think it's a fairly good Tamer lineup here. Going in on the Cool Boy, it's just so strong in this deck. If you're not playing the Cool Boy, I think you're kind of slowing down your own deck. Now, getting on into the options, we have the 3 black memory boost that we kind of looked at before. This is going to be fairly standard. A lot of the decks in the format are going to be playing memory boost. They are super good for consistency, being able to find your pieces. But with this and the Oryuken mode, you might be a little bit weak to memory blockers sometimes if they get a couple out and you're not able to clear them. So that's something to keep in mind in the early game if you're committing on maybe 1-2 black memory boosts and they play out something like Metagame Betamon. That could be a little bit rough, but obviously you have multiple ways to get around it, and just having the consistency is really what you need. So you're going to be playing the black memory boost. It's just you kind of have to be worried about those memory blockers sometimes. And then we have the 2 Kongu and the 1 Breath of the Gods. I've seen people play this in different ratios, maybe 2 and 2, 3-2, 1-2 the other way. I don't really have a preference because I haven't tested it too much myself. I do think you play both because they both have utility in different ways. Breath of the Gods is a very strong card in itself. Obviously, Kongu is a card that is very strong and might even get hit one day because of its strength, but it doesn't do what Breath of the Gods does in being able to prevent things from getting bounced. So one of the big weaknesses of this deck is hitting things that get rid of it in security, which you could hit things like Kishidas Breath or Megadeath and stuff like that. So Breath of the Gods obviously going to be really good there. So I do like playing the both for different utility and not being removed and just setting up really strong boards. Now, getting on to the next list, we are going to see the 4 Doraemon here, so going on the same route, but we do have a drastically different rookie lineup here. So we do have the 4 Doraemon still, but we're only playing 1 Ryudomon with the 3 BT9 Doraemon and the 2 Tsunorizumon. So the difference from what we saw last time, obviously, is we are cutting down Ryudomon down to 1, so that's a very big difference. And we're adding the Tsunorizumon, which I don't think is a card that is very necessary in this format like it was in the past, being able to get those really big swings and go in. With the way the deck is right now, just you're able to swing so many times that just the security tech that you already have without the Tsunorizumon is usually enough to go for that game. But Tsunorizumon can add up if it's something where if you want to get that extra early aggression and go a little bit faster, it can help. But I think maybe going up in things like the Ryudomon or the Dorumon, so that way you have more search consistency, is probably a little bit better than the Tsunorizumon in this format. Going into the champions, they also have the 1 Grumblemon here, so just got to have that hybrid again. It's just the finisher. If you're going to clear all your opponent's security with these swings, then you have to have a way to finish them without passing back turn, so Grumblemon does that perfectly. Then again, the 4 Darugamon, which is fairly staple. And then this time, instead of the Genryumon, we're going to have the Dex Darugumon, which I feel like is a little bit more staple in this format. It's going to be fairly good. You're going to be able to Digivolve up, be able to get that extra cycle. You'll be able to get the effects to go off. Plus, you can use this with Cool Boy to be able to cycle a little bit more. So I think this card's going to be really good, especially since the last list that we saw did have the 4 Cool Boys. I think Dex Darugumon would have been really good there. But I do like this way more than Genryumon, so I'm going with the 4-4 there. Now, looking at the ultimates, we again are going to have the 4 Dorogreymon and the 3 Dex Dorogreymon, so looking to be sticking to the 7 ultimates. I do think the 8th could be fit in there pretty easily, especially with how many Megas we're playing. It might be good. This list also has the 7 Megas here, except this time, instead of playing the 4 BT9 Alphamon, we're just playing 3 with the 1 BT6 Alphamon. I think the BT6 Alphamon is very nice. It does give you a little bit different take on what you can do with your turn. Also has a very strong security effect if you do hit it. Playing it at 1 obviously is going to be a little bit inconsistent for that security effect, but if you did want to go for the plays where being able to swing and gain the memory, unsuspend, and stuff like that, and then potentially go into the Oryuken mode, you can get that going fairly consistently because of how much draw there is, so I do really like the 1 BT6 Alpha. Then we got the 3 Oryumon, the 3 Alphamon, and the 3 Alphamon Oryuken. I think that's what's going to be fairly standard is the 3-3-3 there. We might see 1 extra in these lists, but I think what's going to stabilize is the 3 of these. I think it's just going to be fairly consistent without having to take too much space in your deck because you already have a bunch of Megas in there. Tamers this time, no Kodas, just the 3 Yuji and the 4 Cool Boys, so no Memory Tamer, just going straight for the memory gain off these Tamers here, which you are going to get it. The 4 Cool Boys is going to work. Yuji is going to be able to get you that cycle. Again, I do think the Koda is nice for early game, but if you need to make room for other things, I guess that is the cut. It is not as valuable as the Yuji and the Cool Boy, just because the effect to put things under and being able to just consistently draw 1, gain 1, and be able to reveal the top 3 and grab pretty much anything you need is going to be fairly strong. Now looking at the options, we do have the Breath of the Gods, the Black Memory Boost, and the Kongu, but instead of playing 1-3-2, we're just playing 2-2-2 here, so fairly good consistent about that. I do like the 2-2 Kongu Breath of the Gods. I think that gives you good enough consistency to see each of them, and just overall good consistency of being able to see them in security to save you and stuff like that. Black Memory Boost, I think, is fine at 2, anywhere between 2 and 3, just because you already have a bunch of search in your rookies and stuff. So this is mostly just kind of that, it's search, but it's more memory gain later for when you go for your Grumblemon and stuff like that. And then obviously the Kongu is very strong. Listless did decide to play 1 X antibody, so that could help you going into it. I don't think this deck really needs it, or it's going to be too helpful to the deck, but it is a little tech that you can play. It will work a little bit, but I don't think you really want the X antibody in here. I think this could be better just even as the 3rd Black Memory Boost. Alright, the last list that we're going to be looking at today does have quite a bit of little mixes up, but something that is still standard is the 4 Doraemon, and then we have the 4 Doraemon and the 4 Ryudomon, so only 8 rookies. So I already said 9 rookies earlier was insane. I already thought 10 was insane, so going down to 8 is already crazy. You are not going to be seeing rookies very often at that rate for sure, unless you're playing in the Mulligan format, which I don't believe they were in JP, so I think this is fairly inconsistent unless you were. If you do, you could potentially get away with it, but you're going to have to Mulligan a lot of hands, which does mean you're putting a lot of cards to the bottom there, so 8 rookies is just a little rough. Now, looking at the champions and even the ultimates, we see that we are playing no Dex cards, so no Dex Darugumon and no Dex Greymon, which is different than pretty much every deck we're going to see. This was very interesting to me. Champions are just 4 Darugumon and 4 Ginryumon, no Grumblemon in here, so cutting the hybrid, which is something that is fairly staple in itself. And then looking at the ultimates, we have just the 4 Greymon and the 4 Saryumon. So Saryumon was very key to the archetype last format, but I think with the way you play the deck, it changes. It's not as optimal, especially when we have access to the decks now. It's just a little bit better, but it is a card that I think you could play as maybe 1 or 2 of as a tech, but I don't think it's as strong. Now getting into the megas, we are having 2 of the BT6 Alphamon, 4 Oriumon, and 3 Alphamon, so definitely looking to try to get that Oriumon source underneath as consistently as possible, playing that as 4. It does have its own uses digivolving up into it, but I think it's much better served as putting the source underneath, so I don't know if that's just for consistency, but most lists we saw are playing 3. I think this is one of the few lists that are playing 4, so going full on there. Then looking at the level 7s, we are playing 5. So instead of playing the 3 Oryukin mode, we're playing 1 Oryukin, which already in itself seems very insane. Pretty much one of the key cards being able to do a lot there. So not playing more than just 1 Oryukin is fairly inconsistent and seems a little scary. But we also threw in the 2 Omnimon X Antibody and the 2 Zwart Defeat. So really big mix-up in level 7s there. Obviously, you can get up into Zwart Defeat, go into Omnimon X Antibody, do stuff like that, but in a deck like this, I think making room for this is a little bit too much. You want that, or you can maybe make room for something like a 1 of Zwart Defeat if you wanted to maybe take care of Tamers or just have a nice security check, but I think just having the Oryukin is going to be the least bricky level 7. And then another crazy thing is the Tamers, we don't have any Cool Boy, just 2 Coda and 3 Yuji, so the 2 Coda has been what we've seen so far, but no Cool Boy, so not going to be able to get the extra cycle, search, and memory gain off of that. And then going into the options, we have a mix-up in the options. We are not playing Breath of the Gods, we are still playing Kongu, but we're not playing Breath of the Gods or Black Memory Boost. We're playing 1 Brave Metal, so and Ice Ryujin, so we do have forms of removal. I don't know if they're the most consistent. We have other ways that we could have gotten removal if we were playing like the Dex cards, for example. So I don't know how I feel about Brave Metal and Ice Ryujin. I haven't really seen them, but it's just this list is so interesting that they made so many different text choices that it's kind of hard to add them all up to see how they'd work together. So I don't know how I feel about it. I would have to see it in testing, but knowing that we're cutting Breath of the Gods and Black Memory Boost makes these slots hurt a little bit more, especially when we already have a lot of tech slots up here. Then we got 2 of the X Antibody here. Again, I don't think this card is very key in the deck. It is something that you could tech in. We saw it at 1, now we're seeing it at 2. I think it can give you some nice plays, but I think there are just cards that have higher value than this that you can put in the deck. And this is already a deck that, an archetype in general, that just has very tight deck space, so playing all these techs is going to be a little bit rough when they don't fully synergize to your main combo. Alright, here we are back at the spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and go through this and see what we see as the outliers here. Again, if you are interested in looking at this spreadsheet or the decks that I have linked that we are looking at for this, they will be linked in the description, so be sure to check that out. So getting onto the Digitama, it was pretty straightforward. All decks were playing the 4 of Doraemon. It's very key. It's the best egg, so it makes a lot of sense. I did mention that some decks were playing Kyokyomon and ended up only 2 decks playing it as a 1 of. So if you're expecting to cycle a lot more or maybe play in a very control-heavy format, you could play that 5th egg there, but most players deciding to just go with the 4 of. Now, getting on into the rookies, the BT9 Doraemon, the only one that was played as a 4 of all 12 decks, so very staple card there. I do agree with it. It's going to search very good. Plus, the inheritable is just so strong. It's one of the better inheritables, so playing this at any less than 4 doesn't make 2 cents. Then we had 8 decks playing BT9 Doraemon. Very spread count too, because we have 2s all the way down for what counts we were played. This is a new card that I think is very interesting because it does add a lot of cycle to the deck, but it doesn't add too much else. Like, yes, you get to draw some cards, but you're not getting a good inheritable. Searching it out doesn't really do too much, so I think this is a card that's better suited as maybe a 1 or 2 tech. We did see some decks go up higher, obviously, but I think going into the English metagame, this will probably stabilize a little bit lower. Then we got the Ryudamon, which was fairly stable as well, being played in 11 decks, so only 1 deck not playing it, and most decks playing it as a 4 of with 8 of them, but we did see a spread count of this as well going down. We did see a deck that was playing it as 1, but also 2 and 3. I think Ryudamon is good enough to be playing at minimum 3, if not just 4 and 4. It's probably where you should be at, but I think you should be playing minimum 3 Ryudamon. It's just good cycle, and especially you just need to have good inheritable X antibodies, so when you build up, your stack just does something instead of being just empty like it would be if you were to have BT9 Doraemon there. Then we got 3 Tsunarizamon still staying alive in these X antibody style decks. Again, I don't think it's very necessary here. You're going to be able to get those 1-2 extra security checks, be able to swing multiple times and go for game, so Tsunarizamon doesn't really help that much. I definitely think I just like BT9 Doraemon more, so that way you can get the on-play cycle. When the effect of the Tsunarizamon when it's on the board to get piercing, I don't think is going to happen at all. So I think this is just a card that you want to have in raising when you build up as a rookie, and then if it doesn't go in the rookie raising slot, then it's not too useful. So it definitely makes sense that it was cut down so severely from previous formats. Now, getting on into the champions, this is where things start to get a little more closer to each deck and less options going around. As we see here, the champions, only 4 of them played around. We had the Dorugumon, which had 12 decks playing it at 4, of course. Again, fairly staple, a very strong card. Dex Dorugumon only played in 10 decks, so 2 decks choosing not to play it, but all the decks that did play it played it at the 4. Ginryumon, still barely hanging on with 4 decks playing it, but 2 of them choosing to play it at 4, so still fairly popular in those slots, but again, I think the Dex Drugamon is just going to help you way more. And then Grumblemon as the 1 of in 7 of the decks. This honestly surprised me that it was only 7. I honestly thought that the 1 of or 2 of Grumblemon was definitely going to be in at least 10 to 12 of the decks, so going into it with only 7 coming out, I do think that's surprising. I think it is fairly key to the deck, just gives you that little extra finisher without really having to add too much. I don't think it takes away from the deck. I think it only adds. So I do think it's a good 1 of. Now, getting on into the ultimates, we see Dorogreymon, 12 out of 12 decks, and that lines up with the Darugamon and the Dorumon back here. So we see these are very staple cards to the level in this deck. If playing this, you should really be playing these cards all at 4. It just makes a lot of sense. It's just something that seeing this isn't going to be a surprise. They're just very key. Dexdora Greymon, again, only in 10 decks, which surprised me a lot. Most decks playing it as a 4 of, though, but 3 and 2 right behind it. The decks that we looked at played as a 3 of, but again, I like 8 ultimates. I think that's going to be good consistency, so playing this at 4 alongside the Dora Greymon is what I would like. And then we have a couple other ultimates down here with the Saryu and Greydamon. I don't think these are really going to be used too much. These are just little techs that were played around. I think Saryumon had its time in the light, and I really don't think Greydamon is going to do it at all. So when playing the ultimates, I would really just focus on playing these 2 and deciding how many ultimates you want to play. And then if you were going to splash into another one, I would probably go Saryumon as a 1 of if you wanted to. Now, getting on to the Megas, we see both the Oryumon and the Alphamon BT9 were played in 12 decks. The Oryumon was split right down the middle in 6 decks playing it as a 4 of and 6 decks playing it as a 3 of. So, gonna have to be a personal choice there, it looks like. Alphamon makes a lot of sense, and the fact that it's played as a 3 of with 9 decks and 2 of the decks playing it as a 2 of and only 1 deck playing it as a 1 of, which is a little bit weird, but that's just kind of an outlier. We're going to be focusing here for sure. I think the 3 makes sense. Like I said multiple times, the 3-3 and the 3 Oryuken I think are going to be kind of the main thing, with maybe Tech Alphamon here as a 1 of, because we do see BT6 Alphamon is teched in 6 decks, 4 decks playing as a 1-of, a couple decks playing as a 2-of, but I think it is a nice 1-of. It gives you a little bit different dynamic there, but for the most part, these are going to be your main megas up here, and if you wanted to tech a 1-of Alphamon, I think feel free. Now, getting on to the level 7s, it's pretty much just Alphamon or Yukon. We have 9 decks playing it as a 3-of, and then we have the 2 2-ofs, and we saw the 1 deck that was playing it as the 1-of, and they are also playing the Antibody and the Zwart Defeat. I think these are just outliers. Again, I really wouldn't play the X-Antibody Omnimon. You could maybe tech a Zwart Defeat, but I think you should just be playing the Alphamon or Yukon, and that's it. So these were mostly just a very interesting list that we looked at earlier, but it's mostly an outlier, and you should just be playing the Oryukin. Now for the Tamers, it's fairly even up here. Coda, Yuji, and Cool Boy sitting at 10, 11, and 10. So Cool Boy I thought was going to be played in all the lists. Very surprised that it was not. That's definitely a very hard cut to make. Coda, I did know was getting cut down a lot, so I didn't know if it was going to get played in all the lists. We did see it getting played at a pretty low count of 2 or 1 quite a bit there, so Coda kind of straying away from the spotlight that we had before, but Yuji staying strong. Only 1 list that wasn't playing it. Surprised you're not playing this in every list, again, just like Cool Boy, because it gives you a lot of value. I do really like the Coda because it is the Memory Tamer. Memory Tamers have a lot of value, but the value you get from these 2 is just so high that not having these at 12 is pretty insane. Then we have the 1 outlier, Hero, just because there was a deck that was playing a red package. Obviously, it's not going to stick. I don't think you need that. If you want to play the Delicate Plan in this deck, you're going to have to cut some pretty key pieces, and this is already a deck that can sometimes have consistency issues if you don't find your rookies and stuff like that. So I really don't think the red package is going to help you here. Now, looking at the options, we do have quite some text here at the bottom, but looking at these top 4, Black Memory Boost played in 10 of the decks as either a 3-of or a 2-of, so 2-of being the most common, but 3-of also up there as well, right behind. I think 2 or 3 would make perfect sense. There's no reason to play 1, and there's not really any reason to play 4. 2 to 3 is just a good consistency number. You already have a good amount of search in this deck and good ways to draw, so again, it's just a search that gets you memory later, and memory boosts are just going to be around all format. Kongu only played in 8 decks, just doesn't make any sense at all. This is the main one where why is this not in 12 of the 12 decks? In fact, how is there 4 decks that didn't play it? I think that's fairly surprising. But them playing it as a 2-of is what makes sense. I think that's the ratio that I like the best, especially if you're playing it with the Breath of the Gods. You don't need as much. Breath of the Gods only played in 4 of the decks, so again, that's a little bit lower. I could see Breath of the Gods not be playing in every deck, depending on what the meta you're expecting is, but Kongu is just such a very strong card in itself that it's kind of like Ice Wall in a way where you just kind of play it because of its pure strength for the cost. Then we got 7 decks playing the X-Antibody option. I already said a couple times I really don't like this card in this list that much. I don't think it's that needed. So was teched in there a couple times as a 1-of or a 2-of, but I wouldn't really recommend putting in your deck too much. But with that being said, this is the ratios for Alphamon. So if you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if you wanted to get access to this, it is going to be linked in the description. So go ahead and down there and you can do whatever you'd like with this. Again, if you don't know what a card does, be sure to click on the name right here. It will take you to DigimonCard.io and you'll be able to get a full breakdown of that card. But with that being said, I will catch you all next time for another breakdown video. I hope you have a fantastic day. Peace out.